writers? If you could tell them one or two things, what would that be?
Well, the really main thing if you want to be a writer, it sounds silly to say it, is you have to be able to read. And it's very hard for people who want to be a good writer if they don't read, because the more you read, the better you become as a writer, because you learned from other writers. I learned from I read Heidi, I read Little Women, I read Enid Blyton. I read so many books when I was younger, and every writer I read, I learned from. And I think if you don't read, it's very hard. It's like if you want to be a footballer and you decide, well, I'm not going to practice kicking football. I'm just going to be a famous footballer, but I'm not actually going to kick football. So you have to read if you want to be a writer. And also if you're writing, I think, to write, it doesn't have to be a big novel. You can write little notepads and books. If you go to the cinema, what do you think of that film? If you go to visit your friend's house, what happened there? Keep a diary, write letters and notes. You kind of worry with all the text messages now that a lot of these notes and little things are going to go, which will affect people in terms of writing. I suspect books are going to get shorter and shorter and shorter. But the more you write and the more you read, the better you get. And also, in your head, people get lots of ideas for stories. But the really big thing is, and the difference between those who write and those who don't write is, when you get the idea and you see the pictures in your head, is to actually write it down. Because lots of people get the idea and their heads are full of dreams and things happening, but they don't actually take out the piece of paper or don't turn on the computer or the laptop or the iPad and don't put it up in it. So even though they have this brilliant story in their head, it never gets any of it down on the page. And as you put the words on the page, something happens in your brain that makes a connection, that makes the story come together. And you don't even have to start at the beginning. It's just the picture you see in your head. And we all get pictures in our head, but it's to actually put it down on a page or on a computer screen is the most, and that's actually the difference. And often children write to me and they say, I want to be a writer, I really want to be a writer. But any child who writes to me, who actually goes and puts a letter and puts a stamp on it and posts it and finds my publisher's name and does all that, I say, well, you are well on track to be a writer, because you have done that extra thing. Loads of people say, oh, I love Marita Conlon McKenna's books, I love reading her stories and blah, blah, blah. But you actually took a piece of paper, you wrote down what you thought of the books and told me things I didn't know about the books, or you were interested in, or about yourself or your family, things happened to you in school, and then you went and actually posted it. So forcing me to write back to you, really, but to respond to you. But that's the actual thing, because writers have to be very brave. They have to not just put it on a page, but they have to send it to somebody. And lots of people will somebody even write a bit, but they never send it to anybody or show it to anybody. So anybody who writes a letter like that, is actually taking that step to being a writer. And I think it's always surprised me, because sometimes I get letters back and say, oh, I've just had my first book published, or I wrote, and often I'm at a book launch and somebody say, I wrote to you when I was a child, because I'm so old now at this stage. It's terrible to say, but they wrote to me when they were children. Now I'm at their book launches. And they said, and you wrote back to me. And that's lovely, because to me it shows that I kind of recognise that talent in them when they were younger. Because often I'll say, you are definitely going to be a writer, you write beautifully, I love the way you write, and so it's very important to read, to write, and to also, if you have stories in your head, put it down on the paper and then send it off to somebody.
Brilliant.
The next stage, or contact a writer, or whatever you want to do.
That's great advice. Thank you very much, Marita. Thank you to Marita Conlon McKenna for joining us today in the Lexicon Library and Cultural Centre.